I've been a game developer for the past 4 years. Throughout this time I have used a total of 3 engines: Godot, Unity and Game Maker. And even some of these games are live in the Google Play Store. Today I want to share the best games that I created with you. I started off using Godot, and with it I created tons of simple mini games. That well, they were complete, but they could have probably been even better, but well, they were just the first test that I performed as a game developer. I started off creating this space guy game. Then in Catch 'em All, once again the player moves around, but in this time the player has to collect the coins before the time is out. And as levels go by, there are more and more coins that need to be collected in order to pass the level. I also created this pretty simple wave shooter. It didn't have any kind of sprites or lots of things, but what I really like about this game are the particles that are emitted when an enemy is killed. Also some screenshots that there are, and also the post-processing effects. I started to create games of my own. This first one was called Touch. It was basically an idle clicker game, so the player had to click on that football and the coins would increase. The player was able to actually buy some items in the item shop, some boosters, some multipliers, etc. So it was quite simple, but at least I was able to implement an in-game shop that was quite interesting. I also created this other game called Sloption. Basically I didn't know what game to put it, so I thought about the explosion and changing it a little bit with something like space. So it is indeed quite similar to Space Guy, but well, I actually used other assets. I also modified the player movements a little bit. And the idea was that I was always able to create games more and more on my own. And probably the best game that I created in Godot is called God Noel. Once again, do not ask about why does it have that name. But well, basically I remember a pretty old game that has this gravity system. And I basically wanted to use this gravity system and basically create another game. I remember that I was creating this game during Christmas. So well, that's why the theme of it is Santa. And this is probably the most complete project that I created in Godot. But actually the most important experience on Godot that I currently have is in terms of the YouTube channel that you are in right now, that I dedicated the past 2 years. And the fact that I also became a Semba course instructor in, for example, Godot. After using Godot, I switched to Unity. The first game that I created, I basically followed the tutorial. This game was called John and Grunt. And basically we had the player that we could control and shoot bullets at the enemy, that was called Grunt. Then I also created this game that was called The King. That was basically an endless runner, quite similar to the Chrome Dino game that it is played when you have no internet on Google Chrome. Once again, these were quite simple games, but that really helped me understand a little bit Unity. I also wanted to experiment a little bit in 3D. So that's why I found a YouTube video on how to create helix jump in Unity. So I also went ahead and created. I created this game that was quite interesting called Escape the Toaster. That basically you control a fork, and the idea is that you do not collide with the toaster, because if not, well, you would be electrified and you don't want that, so you have to avoid colliding with these toasters. I also wanted to replicate Color Switch, so I created this other game. The main difference is the fact that, well, I also wanted to include post-processing effects. But well, it was more or less the exact same thing as Color Switch. Then I took part in a game jam. And to be honest, I don't really remember either the game of the game jam, nor the topic of it, or the theme of it. But well, I of course had not a lot of time, and I created this game called The Faster The Better. That was literally just some super simple reaction test. Now after all that experience, I started to create my own games, and I actually started to publish them in the Google Play Store. The first game that I created is called Swipe Never Stop. Basically an arrow appears on the screen and you have to swipe towards that direction. For example, if the arrow is facing up, you have to swipe up. If the arrow is facing down, you have to swipe down, etc. Every time that you do a correct swipe, you get a pretty satisfying particle effect. You also get backgrounds that are changing its color. Then I created Protect the UFO. Actually, this was a copy of a game that I found of Ketchup that I just found super fun. Actually, the first idea was to copy the core gameplay and then try to make it a little bit better, add more elements or whatever. But well, I was feeling that I was just running out of time, that I was spending more time that I wanted. So I literally published it being a copy of other games, of dozens of games that are out there that are quite similar. But well, I was still able to learn a lot, and still the game is quite fun to play. Once again, I wanted to create an idle clicker game, so I created this one, VCool, in which I also created my own sprites, basically my own emojis, that the player was able to customize in the shop system. So this was a pretty interesting game, let's say. But well, of course, quite simple, quite repetitive. It didn't have that much depth. And here is when actually the best games start to be released. I remember that it was a time when Argentina was playing the World Cup. Well, actually when Argentina won the World Cup. So of course I am Argentinian, so I was super happy because of that, and I actually wanted to make a game on that. So I created World Cup Collector. As you can see, the main mechanic is quite similar to a game that I created in Godot, basically to the catch 'em all. Well, actually that I didn't create on my own, that I followed a YouTube course for that. And after this, I started to work at Voodoo as an external studio. Basically, Voodoo is one of the biggest mobile game development companies out there, for example, the creators behind Helix Jump. And well, they have this program in which you can participate for free, in which they can really help you test some prototypes. They really offer you guidance by chatting with some experts on hyper casual and hybrid casual mobile games. So following this program, I created a total of 3 games. The first one is basically a Circle Combat. So this is a battle game. Quite simple, quite original. I personally really like it. So yes, I took that mechanic, I combined it with some kind of sumo match. So I really think that the core gameplay is quite interesting and fun to play. Then we have Shake It and Find It. Probably you have already seen some games similar to this one, in which you basically have a pool of hundreds of objects and you have to find some specific objects. But well, here the idea was that in every single level you had to find, instead of some specific objects, or for example being able to collect 3 hamburgers, 3 strawberries and 3 pieces of meat, instead of that you would have to collect 3, 4, 5 keys, whatever. And the last game that I created inside of this program is called Match 3 Pass. It is basically a match 3 game, but well, its main difference has to do with the different obstacles that appear. Basically, every time that the player completes one stage, there is one obstacle that is surpassed, being a zombie, some spikes or whatever. The aesthetic of the game is actually quite good. And well, overall it is a game that is actually also super interesting for you to try out. Finally, on my experience on GameMaker, I can't really comment a lot since I didn't create games for me myself. I basically create games for Semba as a course instructor, so they aren't directly games for Semba but for teaching and educational purposes. Now in the middle of this there are lots of things that I am not able to show you, as well as it happened with GameMaker, because there are also some works that I did for some particular clients that I was able to get through Fiverr, through LinkedIn and through other platforms, that I do not really have the right to show over here or to really comment on them. But I can tell you that with Godot I wasn't able to get literally any client. And well, when I switched to Unity and after working for Voodoo, creating those 3 prototypes that I already commented, I was able to get some clients on Unity projects. And well, I was actually able to make some money from them, of course. So this was all for this video. I hope that you could actually entertain yourself a little bit. If this was the case, please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you see more similar content, and let me know which of these games you like the most. See you in the next one, and bye bye.